By some estimates, there are some 300,000 people that will be fleeing Afghanistan under terror as the country devolves into chaos under Taliban control. There will be some headed here soon, calling the Mid-South home. Fox 13's Dakari Turner takes a look at what will play out in the weeks ahead.
Each of the people coming into the United States are seeking what are known as special immigrant visas, meaning they've worked directly with the United States military in one fashion or another. Because of that, each of them and their families are under direct threat of retribution from the Taliban. Hundreds of men and women, gripped with fear and desperation, clinging to the wheels of a departing plane, were among the first images to emerge from the crisis in Afghanistan. Amid that chaos, evacuated were at least two families that will arrive in Memphis to a stark new reality, and their first few days will be critical.
When they arrive in Memphis, they're going to be scared. What can they expect in those first few days?
Over the next 30 to 90 days, we're helping them enroll in programs and services at World Relief and with some of our other partners.
It will be the job of PJ Moore, director of resettlement group World Relief in Memphis, to help smooth their transition, a process that will be mired in challenges, cutting through government red tape to obtain housing and social services as they suddenly find themselves near the bottom of a socioeconomic ladder amid a new culture and, in some cases, an unknown language.
They've served alongside our military.
Many with families still in Afghanistan whose lives remain under threat.
And I've seen the images of fathers handing their children over the wall to get into the airport in Afghanistan, and it's heartbreaking.
They may not be welcomed right away. To the people who say perhaps they don't want them here, what would you say to those people?
Well, if you try to put yourself in those shoes, and that's a lot of times what I reflect on is these families are doing what they can to survive.
Ultimately joining those who have come ahead of them, estimated to be in the hundreds, who have settled in Memphis in recent years as America ends involvement in its longest war. Before each of the families reaches the United States, they will have to undergo lengthy screening processes at military bases all over the world and then right here in the United States as well. The Biden administration has pledged to accept at least 22,000 special immigrant visa applicants by the end of this month. Dakari Turner, Fox 13 News.